Now to new developments tonight in the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. Authorities are now focusing tonight on two central pieces of evidence, including what could be that crucial DNA found in Nancy Guthrie's home.
The garage door closed at 9:50 on the evening of January 31st, 2026. And somewhere in the quiet desert air of Tucson, Arizona, that small, ordinary sound marked the beginning of a nightmare that has not ended since. Before we get into the evidence, before we talk about what the FBI found and what it means, you need to know who Nancy Guthrie was, not as a headline, as a person. Nancy Guthrie was 84 years old. She had lived in Tucson for more than 50 years. She raised 3 children in that desert city, Savannah, Annie, and Cameron. She worked for nearly 2 decades at the University of Arizona. Every Sunday morning without fail, she joined a virtual church service with a close friend across the miles. She was mentally sharp. She was deeply independent. She lived alone in her home in the Catalina foothills, a quiet, well-established neighborhood tucked into the hills north of the city. She also had a fragile heart and limited mobility. She depended on daily medication she could not miss. Her daughter Savannah, yes, the same Savannah Guthrie many of you have watched anchor NBC's Today show for years, described her mother's vulnerability with steady words and eyes that held everything she couldn't bring herself to say out loud. Here is what makes this detail so disturbing. Someone out in that desert night already knew all of that. They had been paying close attention, and they had been watching for some time before January 31st ever arrived. Now let's walk through how that Saturday unfolded, because the timeline of that one day is the foundation of everything investigators have built since. At approximately 5:32 in the afternoon, Nancy took an Uber to the home of her daughter Annie, who lives nearby in Tucson with her husband, Tommaso Shini. The drive was about 10 minutes between two households that had stayed close for years. What happened inside Annie's home that evening was completely ordinary. Dinner together, card games afterward, the kind of comfortable, easy family night that no one ever thinks to remember until they have to. Nobody at that table felt uneasy. Nobody sensed anything closing in around them. Later that evening, Tommaso drove Nancy home in the family's blue Honda CR-V. At 9:48 in the evening, that vehicle pulled into the driveway of Nancy's Catalina foothills home. Ring camera footage and digital records from the garage door both confirmed that Nancy was physically on her property. The garage door opened. She went inside. At 9:50, it closed, and Tommaso's car pulled out of the driveway and disappeared into the Tucson night. Those 2 minutes from 9:48 to 9:50 represent the last documented moment Nancy Guthrie was seen safe and sound by a member of her own family. If you are not already subscribed to this channel, please take a moment right now and hit that button. This case is still open and still moving, and we are following every confirmed development as it comes. What followed over the next 4 hours is where this story goes dark, because nobody knows with certainty what happened inside that house after the garage door closed. There are no clear witnesses. There is no clean narrative. There is only a small collection of evidence that investigators have assembled piece by piece, and each piece raises more questions than it settles. Here is what the evidence does confirm. In the early hours of February 1st, sometime before 1:50 in the morning, a masked individual appeared at Nancy's front door. The doorbell camera captured him. His head was tilted deliberately downward to avoid the lens. Then he did something that caught former FBI behavioral analysts completely off guard when they reviewed the footage. He didn't smash the camera. He didn't tear it from the wall. Instead, he reached toward a potted plant near the entrance, pulled a piece of foliage from it, and used it to carefully, methodically cover the lens. Investigators noted immediately why that specific choice matters so much. Smashing the camera would have triggered an alert on Nancy's indoor screen. A masked face appearing on that screen would have sent her straight to the phone. But covering the camera quietly, carefully, meant Nancy would see nothing unusual. He needed that door to open. He needed her unaware, and he had clearly thought through exactly how to make that happen before he ever set foot on her doorstep. That is not the behavior of someone who stumbled onto this property by chance. That is a person who had studied the entrance, mapped the camera position, and understood how that doorbell system would respond. Just before 1:50 in the morning, the doorbell camera went completely offline. About 20 minutes later, a separate outdoor camera detected movement near the property. And then, at exactly 2:28 in the morning, Nancy Guthrie's cardiac monitoring device, the device tracking her fragile heart in real time, lost its signal permanently and went silent. That timestamp is one of the most significant forensic markers in this entire investigation. The following morning, when Nancy failed to appear for her Sunday church service, her close friend called. No answer. The family was reached. By just before noon on February 1st, family members had arrived at the house. Pima County Sheriff's deputies pulled up minutes later. What they found at the front of that residence confirmed this was not a simple wellness check. Biological evidence, later confirmed as belonging to Nancy Guthrie, was recovered right there at her front door. She was gone. And within hours of that discovery, law enforcement made a quiet but deliberate move that would shift the direction of the investigation. They towed a blue Honda CR-V from the driveway of Annie Guthrie's home. The same car, the same driver, the same vehicle that had last carried Nancy Guthrie safely to her front door. That car was now evidence, and what investigators would spend the next 66 days looking for inside it is where this story takes its most unexpected turn. When law enforcement impounds a vehicle in a case like this, most people picture someone opening the door, looking around, and either finding something or not. The reality of what investigators actually do to a car is something else entirely. And understanding that process is the only way to truly grasp why the blue Honda CR-V became so central to the Nancy Guthrie investigation. The forensic examination of that vehicle did not begin the moment it arrived at the evidence lot. It began before anyone touched a single door handle. First comes full documentation. Photographers work the exterior from every angle, the condition of the bumpers, any marks on the body panels, the state of the tires. Then the interior, seat positions, mirror angles, every personal item on the dashboard or in the cup holder. Every detail is recorded exactly as found, because defense attorneys in a courtroom will eventually ask about every single step. If a forensic examiner cannot explain why they did something a specific way, that becomes a hole in the case, and experienced investigators do not leave holes. After documentation, the real work begins. Specialists bring in ultraviolet and alternative light sources, tools that reveal what the human eye cannot see under normal conditions. Biological fluids, blood traces, even after a surface has been wiped. Fibers that barely contrast against seat fabric. Cleaning does not destroy these things. It only makes them less visible to someone not looking with the right equipment. A forensic specialist with a specialty light sees what a car's owner believed was gone. Then comes the collection phase. Tape lifts pull microfibers from seat upholstery and floor mats. Specialized filters capture microscopic particles. Cotton swabs gather biological traces from door handles, headrests, and seat belts. Every sample goes into its own sealed container with a code, a date, and the signature of the specialist who collected it. Chain of custody is everything. One broken link in that chain, and a piece of evidence becomes useless in front of a jury. And then there is the trunk. In hundreds of criminal cases across the country, the trunk has been the place where the story finally cracked open. It is the space people think least about when they are trying to clean up quickly. Things get placed in there fast, sometimes in the dark, sometimes in a panic. A bag, clothing, an object that only stayed there for 20 minutes. 20 minutes is more than enough time to leave a trace. Forensic teams treat the trunk floor, the side panels, the spare tire compartment, and the space underneath it, all with extreme methodical care. This principle has a name. French criminologist Edmond Locard formulated it in the early 20th century. Every contact leaves a trace. It is the foundation of modern forensic science, and it applies in every case, without exception. When two surfaces come into contact, they exchange material. A fiber from a coat catches in seat upholstery. Soil from the bottom of a shoe settles into the grooves of a floor mat. Skin cells, which we shed constantly, simply by existing, are left on every surface a person touches. You can scrub a car down with cleaning products, vacuum it, wipe every surface with alcohol. Under the right laboratory conditions, traces remain, especially when the cleaning was done quickly, especially in the dark. Running alongside the physical examination was a second line of investigation entirely: the car's digital record. A modern vehicle is in many ways a computer on wheels. Navigation systems save routes. Bluetooth connections log which devices the car paired with and when. Odometer readings, average fuel consumption, trip times, and door open events are all stored in the onboard control unit. If forensic data specialists reach that system before the information is overwritten, they end up with something close to a detailed diary of the car's recent movements. In the Nancy Guthrie case, this data extraction became one of the most consequential moments of the entire investigation. According to reporter Brian N. Tin, who confirmed the detail publicly, the forensic download of the Honda CR-V's onboard electronics actually caused a complete system failure during the process. The car's electronics were, in effect, damaged by the search itself. That failure required the vehicle to be moved to a local Tucson mechanic for specialized repair work before it could be released back to the family. A fact that accounts for a portion of the 66 days the car remained in law enforcement custody. But that mechanical explanation only goes so far. Former Pima County SWAT Commander Bob Krieger, who understands the internal workings of that department and how high-stakes decisions get made, addressed the extended timeline directly. He told reporters that in complex federal investigations, maintaining a flawless chain of custody isn't about paperwork. It is about preparing for a jury. His words were specific. The goal is to build a case so airtight it leaves zero doubt in the minds of 12 people sitting in that box. Krieger noted that 66 days is within the normal range for a joint federal and county investigation of this complexity, and that the bureaucratic weight of a multi-agency process moves at a deliberately careful pace. Then, on March 10th, reporter Dave Mack confirmed what investigators had been doing with the vehicle all along. The Honda was at an auto shop in Tucson under the direct legal supervision of the Pima County Sheriff's Department. It was being reassembled, not repaired for the family, reassembled after what Mack described as a search that left no interior surface or panel unexamined. Investigators had stripped the door linings, pulled up the trunk floor, and probed every dark cavity the car contained. Reassembly is not part of the search. It is what comes after. It is the cleanup that follows a completed forensic autopsy of a vehicle. By the time the car was returned to Annie Guthrie's family, investigators stated plainly that they had extracted what they needed from it. Whatever the Honda gave to the laboratory, fibers, trace material, environmental particles, or a clean result confirming nothing unusual, that information was now locked inside an active evidence file. The car had spoken. What it said remained between the forensic laboratory and the people building this case. And that is where the most important question in this entire investigation quietly lives. Because two possibilities exist, and they pull the case in completely opposite directions. If biological evidence connected to Nancy Guthrie was recovered from inside that vehicle, the implications would be impossible to contain. It would mean the car was present during events tied to her disappearance. It would force investigators to reconstruct the entire timeline around that discovery, where the car traveled, who had access to it, and whether any surveillance camera or digital record could confirm those movements. But if the search produced nothing, no matching fibers, no biological traces, no environmental material linking the Honda to locations of interest, then something equally powerful would happen. The theory surrounding that vehicle would begin to collapse, and investigators would be forced to look in a completely different direction. On February 16, 2026, Tommaso Shani was publicly cleared. No charges, no further suspicion. GPS records, digital data, and the full forensic picture combined to remove his name from the center of this investigation. Which means the blue Honda CR-V, still impounded, still being examined, still the subject of every question anyone was asking, may have ultimately mattered not because it proved something against Tommaso Shani, but because it proved something for him. And if the car cleared an innocent man, the person who actually walked up to Nancy Guthrie's door that night is still out there, still unidentified, still unnamed in any federal database. That is where this investigation stands, and what comes next may depend entirely on the forensic threads that are still being pulled. Here is what we know with certainty as of the time this video was recorded. Nancy Guthrie has been missing for more than 3 months. No arrest has been made. No suspect has been publicly named. And the man, captured on camera at her front door in the early morning hours of February 1st, has not been identified. What investigators do have is an enormous amount of work, a significant amount of evidence, and at least one forensic thread that is actively being followed right now. Let's start with what has been confirmed, and then work through where each piece of the investigation currently stands. The Pima County Sheriff's Department has stated publicly that more than 400 investigators and law enforcement personnel have been involved in this case. That is not a routine number. It reflects the federal reach of the investigation. The FBI joined early, and the two agencies have been coordinating closely since the first days of February. More than 40,000 tips have been submitted through official channels. The family has offered a $1 million reward for information, leading to Nancy's safe return, or to a resolution in the case. Sheriff Chris Nanos made a statement in the weeks following Nancy's disappearance that many viewers have found both honest and chilling. He told reporters directly that the person who came to Nancy Guthrie's door was deliberate, prepared, and not acting on impulse. And then he said something that has stayed with people who heard it. He warned the public not to assume that because this happened to a prominent family, it could not happen to anyone else. His words were clear. Nobody should feel immune from this kind of threat simply because they are not connected to a well-known name. That warning from an experienced law enforcement official is not theater. It reflects what investigators believe about the nature of this crime. Now, in terms of the forensic picture beyond the vehicle, inside Nancy's home, investigators recovered a partial DNA profile. The source of that sample has not been disclosed, but it was recovered from inside the residence. According to reports confirmed by multiple journalists covering this case, the partial profile is not a strong enough match to identify someone through the National CODIS database, the federal system that stores DNA profiles from convicted offenders and crime scenes across the country. A partial profile simply may not have enough data points to make a confident match through traditional means. But investigators have not stopped there. Genealogical DNA analysis, the same technique that identified the Golden State Killer after decades of searching, is reportedly underway. That method works by comparing the partial profile against consumer ancestry databases, looking for relatives of the unknown individual. It is painstaking, slow work, but it has solved cases that were considered unsolvable. Pima County and the FBI have both used this method in prior investigations. 3 dates have been flagged by investigators as significant: January 11th, January 24th, and January 31st, the night Nancy disappeared. The full significance of the first 2 dates has not been made public, but law enforcement identified them early and made clear they are part of an active pattern of interest. Someone was paying attention to Nancy Guthrie's life in the weeks before she vanished, and those dates appear to map onto moments in that pattern. Savannah Guthrie stepped away from her anchor chair at NBC's Today show following her mother's disappearance. She returned publicly at some point after, but her absence was felt and acknowledged by her colleagues and viewers. Savannah has spoken carefully and with composure in the limited public moments she has allowed herself. She has asked for privacy while making clear that the family is doing everything within their reach to find her mother. And this is where I want to pause for just a moment, because it is easy in a case like this to move through the evidence and the timelines and forget who we are really talking about. Nancy Guthrie got up every morning in a house she had lived in for half a century. She went to her Sunday church service. She played cards with her daughter and son-in-law on ordinary Saturday evenings. She knew everyone in her circle and they knew her. She was 84 years old, careful and independent, and she was not supposed to be at the center of a federal missing persons investigation. She was supposed to be at the table. She was supposed to pick up the phone on Sunday morning. That is who this investigation is about. That is who the reward money is trying to bring home. If you have any information, anything at all, no matter how small it might seem to you, the Pima County Sheriff's Department has a tip line open and active. You can also leave information in the comments below, and this channel will do its part to make sure credible tips are pointed in the right direction. Before I close, I want to ask you one question directly. Based on everything you have heard across these three parts, the timeline, the evidence from the car, the partial DNA, the three flagged dates, where do you believe this investigation is heading? Do you think an arrest is coming soon, or do you believe this case still has months of work ahead of it? Leave your answer in the comments. I read every one. If you have been watching this channel through all three parts of this story and you have not yet subscribed, please do that right now. Every new development in this case will be covered here, and you do not want to miss what comes next. Nancy Guthrie deserves answers. Her family deserves answers. And so does everyone who has been following this story from the beginning.